Indeed, we are live. Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to another OEWeek Live. These are unstructured, unformatted webcasts that we've been doing at OE Global as part of Open Education Week. And part of it is just like getting people to come together in a room and have open conversations. And that's what's going to happen today. I don't know how to organize this. I don't know what's going to happen, but we just have these brilliant people here who are involved with this. There's this thing called AI. You may have heard about it. It's kind of an emerging technology, but no, seriously, like how do we escape this? And I want to credit my colleague Jonathan Poritz, who's here, who will introduce himself. We've had like great conversations, and Jonathan, I love him because he's got very strong and very well-backed opinions, but he's fun. And Jonathan suggested a long time ago, like, can we do some kind of debate, on AI or some kind of, I think he was asking for a discussion. And this is about the best I could do, is just ask people to come in a room and see where it goes. So I'm going to ask everyone to do like the quickest intro, obviously who you are, where you are, and maybe just as quick as you can, like what's your stake, what's your territory in AI? And I will first, of course, ask Jonathan because I roped him into this. Okay, Jonathan, you're on.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Poritz. I was, for 100,000 years, base 2. I was a professor of mathematics and computer science in various universities in the United States, mostly. I left, and I'm now an open ed gig worker. I live in Italy. I taught math and computer science. My stake on AI, and I've worked with open ed organizations a lot. I worked in Colorado. I was doing a lot of things in open ed and on national and international NGOs. My stake on AI, this is a very tough group because I love some of the people dearly in this room, and I know they're doing really cool things for pedagogy with AI. But since January of this year, I draw a direct line from AI to fascism, and I think we need to not use AI because it is supporting people who are destroying the world. So I am totally anti-AI. I think it also does no benefit to our education anyway, except for a few amazing people like those in this room who are doing amazing things with AI, of course. That's my quick.
All right. Way to start it with the spark. I'm going to ask next Amy Collier from Middlebury College. And just so great to see you, Amy. And I look forward to your thoughtful thoughts.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me. My name is Amy Collier. I'm the Associate Provost for Digital Learning at Middlebury College. My colleague Tom and I will be talking a little bit about some work we've been doing. I think recognizing that the polarization around AI creates a really challenging landscape for people to make decisions about their pedagogy, about their classrooms, about their lives. None of this is easy. And so what we've tried to take on is an initiative to grapple with the big issues around AI and education. And so we'll talk a little bit about that digital detox here in a little bit.
So good. And thank you so much. Great to see you. And waving to one of the favorite places in the country of the U.S. is Vermont, and working with Amy is like my brilliant longtime friend Tom.
Right, Tom Woodward, also at Middlebury College, and I think my stake in AI is medium rare. No, I try not to. It is a depressingly serious conversation, but also a very strange place with lots of complexity. And when we even say AI, I'm often really unsure what we mean, given the breadth, scale, and scope of things that we put in that category. So I really struggle with big questions, and my nitty-gritty can be boring. And with that, I'll shut up.
Thank you, Tom. And next, always great to have in the room Alegria Rebenadero from Colorado. And so every time I see her, she's just got such excitement for everything she does. Good morning.
Well, and I am so excited to be here. So yes, my name is Alegria Rivadeneira. I am a distinguished professor at Colorado State University and chair of English and World Languages. I spearheaded the first ZTC degree in Colorado, thanks to Jonathan, who inspired me and roped me in. First, I went kicking and screaming, and then I loved every second of it. My state with AI is I understand there is definitely a bad and ugly about it, but there's also a good. And I struggle with it, but ultimately I know that I need to prepare my students for the tools they're going to be needing for their future. And it's I don't take it lightly, and I try to do it as responsibly as I can. But at the same time, I feel I have to fulfill my mission to prepare my students for the future. And so that's where I am. And I can't wait to share some of the cool things we've been doing here with that.
Fantastic. And also really happy Jonathan introduced me to Liza Long, and like, again, like a conversation with Liza could fill our hour. Welcome, Liza.
Well, yeah, I can talk about AI. It is my special interest. I think probably the most important credential I have here is that I'm a graduate of Jonathan Poritz's Creative Commons certificate licensing course. He was largely responsible for indoctrinating me into the life-changing, transformative power of open education. I'm an associate professor of English at the College of Western Idaho, our state's AI fellow, one of two of us. And I'm also our open education representative to the State Board of Education. And I do some open education consulting with Rebus. Some of you might know their textbook success program. They've rebranded as the Open Publishing Project. My stake in AI is huge. I'm both a student in a PhD English program and a writing instructor. So I have become very interested since I first started playing with these tools in November of 2022 with the intersection between open education and artificial intelligence. I dove in and co-wrote a textbook with ChatGPT 3.5, and I've now integrated generative artificial intelligence into every step of my first year writing courses with mixed results, which I'm in the process of analyzing right now. I have an IRB study that a few students are also assisting me with. So I think the stakes are high. I don't think that Jonathan is wrong. But also I love artificial intelligence. And my first thought when I used it was, wow, this can write my students' papers. But my second thought was, wow, this could be a huge equity builder if I teach my students and if I learn how to use this responsibly and ethically.
Well, welcome. And like, I didn't know Idaho has AI fellows. That's brilliant. We look forward to hearing about that. And next, can I welcome to the stage from the, looks like some snowy slopes of Scotland, Vidmos Misgerda, who's a grad student at University of Edinburgh. Welcome, Vid.
Thank you, Alan. And I'm honored to be in the room with you all. So actually about this background, this is an image from Better Images of AI, and it's about data mining. So if I move to the side, you can see there's people physically digging data, and the image is meant to represent the hidden labor and colonialism that lies behind many of AI efforts and models. My main reason for being here today, I'm a PhD student at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm studying computer science, but not actually anything AI related. Except I've been involved in a study over the past year about the meanings of open AI in education. And we've been asking experts in AI and experts in open education to try and define what do they mean or what do they understand by the term open AI. I think to many people, they don't associate the company OpenAI with open, but then what is open after all? And we're just wrapping up the results of the study, and I wanted to share some of the early findings and also invite thoughts on it so far.
Thank you, Vid. And I love that you mentioned Better Images of AI. That's one of my favorite resources. And welcome. Like, how can I put you last, Lance? Like, anybody who's been at the middle and center of this AI, Lance Eaton.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm Lance Eaton. I am Senior Associate Director of AI in Teaching and Learning. I think that's like my newest role. I still have that new employee smell of about 3 months. But in the last 2 years, I've been just doing and thinking a lot, particularly in public, around what these tools are, what they mean. If I were to say what my stake is, it's I don't know, it has all 57 flavors of Heinz ketchup. I'm a vegetarian, so I'm just mixing metaphors here. But I have 15 different thoughts, positive, negative, neutral, about its role. And I think the biggest thing for me is it's here. It exists. and it's good. It shows up in all sorts of spaces, whether we want it to or not. In like, there are ways we want to thoughtfully resist it, and also that in itself is often feels like a abstinence only message that just isn't going to work in the environment where faculty are, where students are, where people are being asked to use them outside of those spaces. So for me, it's like, how can we figure all of that out while it keeps changing, and while there's all these other pieces that impact how we make sense of it. So it's a very messy meal, I guess, if we're extending that metaphor of going from metaphorical steak to analogous steak.
Oh, thank you so much, Lance. And now, like, is the part where I'm going to try to get out of the way, but I just do want to say, because like I could tell like people are ready to jump in, but I'm really keen as well to hear from the people who actually are working with faculty and students, like trying to like get a sense, because I'm so far removed from that, and I think the reality is a lot different than what we think from reading things online. But anybody, and also like in this 50 minutes, like we're not going to. We'll have some fun, but like, what are some forward-looking things that we can think about doing, not as like solutions, but as like collaborative innovations, and like the research that Vid is doing, and the publications that people are doing, and the advocacy that like demystifying AI. It's my top recommendation for people to be involved with. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and open the floor.
Well, I would love to jump in. Sorry, I always will. I'll raise my hand first. The first thing I would say, Alan, and like Vid's image and description of the image reminded me of this, is I think any conversation should be grounded in the acknowledgement that these tools were developed by exploiting workers, and this largely impacted the global south. There are numerous ethical concerns with the tools, and I do think it's important to have that framework. When I teach with AI with students, we always start with the ethical framework, and I try to build skepticism and Ethan Mollick's idea of being the human in the loop right from the start, because I think that's so essential. And the other thing that I think we sometimes don't acknowledge enough is that all of us are experiencing change fatigue, especially those of us who are teaching. And we've been experiencing that for a long time. I would say our adrenaline has just been going nonstop, because we came right out of COVID into this new incredibly disruptive space. And so if you feel tired and overwhelmed, that's okay, right? Like you should acknowledge that. I feel tired and overwhelmed. I mean, just last week, good grief, then, hey, AI can now write our papers for us, with good real sources. As of last week, I've been playing around with these deep search tools. I'm like, what? This is one more thing I have to think about. But on the other hand, if you can find a few people, like I follow Lance Eaton, for example, right? A few people to just follow who are thoughtful in this space, you don't have to know it all. You don't have to do it all. And also, going back to Mollick's idea, my colleague Joel Glad and I have outlined an additional category. So Mollick talks about cyborgs. That's me. I'm a cyborg. Practically all the writing I do involves AI, except if my professors are watching, I do not use AI for any of my papers, and it's very painful and hard for me to do that at this point. So I'm a cyborg. There are centaurs who, delineate certain tasks to AI and then they have other tasks they keep human. But Joel and I identified a third category. We call them resistors. And we think any conversation about AI absolutely needs to include people who are resistors, like people like Jonathan, people who understand and have deeply grappled with the very real ethical concerns around these tools. So that's where I'll start.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that then, Liza? I mean, I think you do amazing work, and I know Alegria does amazing work, and I talked to her a long time in her house about the work she's actually doing. It's incredible stuff. But you just said you'd start with talking to your students about the ethical issues. If this is based on exploited labor, if we are putting thousands of tons of carbon into the atmosphere to do this thing, if we are empowering with money and power some of some just eugenicist, colonialist, racist scum, how do you then say, okay, these are some issues, now we'll put them aside and let's go on use ChatGPT as we write our papers? How do you personally put those two things, follow one with the other? I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
it's complicated. I live in the United States of America, so everything you said is true about the country I live in. I'm going to hop on an airplane to fly to Colorado and go skiing with my kid this weekend. You know, there are complex, like one of my kids love to tell me there are no like ethical choices under capitalism, and however you feel about that. But, you know, yeah, is it problematic? Sure. Do students need to be aware of this? Sure. Just like they need an honest history of the United States, right? But kind of to echo what Lance said, and I'd love to hear Lance's thought on this, you know, it's here. And my students, especially, I teach at an open access community college in Idaho. I have a lot of first generation students, a lot of English language learners, refugee students. And my students, in order to succeed in the world that we have, not the world that we want, which I hope we can build, but the world that we have, my students need to know how to use these tools. That's going to be something that they need. So I go back to focusing on the potential to build equity for my students by teaching them how to use these tools responsibly. Now, does that mean that your problems do not exist or should not be acknowledged? No, I mean, they're real, right? But the tools are here, they're out there in the world, and my students need these skills. So for whatever it's worth, that's how I justify it. I try to put students at the center of everything I do in my pedagogy. That's how I got into open. That's why I'm really interested. Alan mentioned open AI. I hope we can come back to that because I have so many thoughts about that too. And it is not open AI, right? So, but yeah, Lance, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
It is something I've grown to address regularly because the environmental piece is a concern. And not everybody, but there's people that use that as the thing to not engage with AI at all. In you know, even to your point, Jonathan, of like, and it's connected to all of these like problematic people. And at the same time, like we are right now in this space doing video streaming that's going out to YouTube, right? And the cost, the environmental cost of those are all real. Like the amount of streaming that any of us does now in a day because of all of our meetings, right? In fact, I would imagine some of us are now working from home and so much, 7-8 hours a day are streaming live like this or other entertainment. Like I'm interested in having that conversation about the environmental, about the ethical, about the exploitation. But if we're just going to focus on AI and not recognize that the world has been burning even before AI in all the other structural pieces in education that are part of that, it feels like a very, for me, a very superficial conversation because all of our email, like all the things we do have these energy costs. All the data centers were there before this and things were not going well. The amount of coffee all of us consumes, we know has a significant toll environmentally. We know that unless it's fair trade, and even when it is fair trade, like there is exploitation going on in these systems. And so like my way of approaching it is to say like these things exist and we have to individually figure out where we're comfortable with it unless we want systematic change. But like systematic change is hard because it's not just the thing we don't like, but it's all the other things that we don't think about that also like are attached to that. And so I think that's how I ultimately reconcile it. It's not a great reconciliation. It's only we can talk about AI, but if we're not talking about the digital infrastructure that every college now needs to be a part of, it just doesn't feel serious for me.
I want to interject here. The first thing I want to say is I want to thank Jonathan because when AI just came out, I jumped all in. I was so excited. I was like, can you believe this? And he kind of leveled me. And I am really thankful for that. When him and I had a great conversation on my dining room table, I pointed out that I used to have this beautiful prairie behind my house that stood between me and my university. It was gorgeous. And during the pandemic, somebody came and paved right through it, ripping it, the beautiful habitat for all the tarantulas and the coyotes and this beautiful cactus that we grow just around here. And I was devastated. How dare they do that? Well, interestingly enough, it also cuts my commute in half. And so I had to make a decision, right? Do I go all the way around Or do I use this horrible thing that nobody asked me to build, if they could build, and cut my carbon footprint in half because I'm using it? And needless to say, I do. I use it. But I slow down for the tarantulas. I have been in touch with some of my city representatives to see how we can save parts of our prairie, or how can we responsibly grow our city. These are decisions that we're making every day, and they're not easy. But I wanted to connect it back to the students, because the day that I was still on the fence, the day that I decided to jump on this full force, was when my students, I've been doing this project where they have to design a little children's book with one of the topics of my class. This is my language and society class. And so they talk about, diversity and languages, and they come up, bilingual brain is so cool, whatever. And they make these cute little books, and they'd always been using clip art. And this student wanted to do this book about this dog that traveled all through Latin America. So it was eating cuy in Ecuador, and it was drinking mate in Argentina. There's no clip art for that. Well, AI had come out, and the project wasn't even due for 2 weeks. And he stayed up all night in the excitement of generating images for his book. Then he showed it to 2 of his roommates who stayed up all night, even though the project wasn't due for 2 more weeks, and they stayed up all night. They came to the class and they showed it to all the other students. The excitement that this generated, I don't know about you all, but seeing students be so excited about an assignment that they're taking the initiative and teaching each other and staying up all night, that to me was incredible. And I thought, I need to be looking into this. I also wanted to address Liza's point about that being the great equalizer. Being in languages, as you know, I teach to both heritage language learners who learn the language at home, but I also teach to second language learners. And my second language learners have always struggled. I don't care how long they are going to study, they will never be like a native speaker. Or very few will be. I mean, this takes a lot. Well, now with AI, they have an opportunity to equalize a little bit more. And then my students who actually grew up with Spanish at home, when they're writing in English, they have a chance to sound and be respected in a way that maybe they weren't before. This would include me. I don't know if you noticed, by my ons and my ins, I never get them right. Prepositions are very hard. And I've been in this country now for more than I was in my native country. Do you think I'm not going to use Grammarly when I am addressing my department as the first second language learner of English, chair of English and world languages with all my literature? I would be a fool. And so these are the tools that are important, and I want my students to use them. I also want them to use them because, unlike any other time in the world ever in my whole teaching career, have I been able to generate content specifically for each of the students' needs. The type of differentiation I can achieve with this is unlike anything I could have ever done even a few years back. So yeah, these are very tough decisions. And yeah, I don't want to feed the fascists, Jonathan. Absolutely. Sadly, I think we're feeding them in this way and many other ways. I don't know how we stop it. All I can think is I can use this tool for good and maybe even reverse it, especially on everything that is DEI for me, right back, And so that's where I am. These are not easy decisions. Absolutely.
Been thinking a little bit about your original question, Alan, about the ways in which folks who are working closely with faculty and students on campuses are trying to approach this exact set of questions. And I think this is, for us at Middlebury, it's been the key driving question is, how do we help our faculty navigate this current moment, and how do we help our students we primarily work with faculty, so kind of by sideways, how do we help our students? And I think one of the things that we've tried to do with our digital detox is recognize that there is some real tactical kind of support that we need to provide to faculty. How do you design a syllabus now in a day where these kinds of tools may or may not impede the learning that you want to see in your classroom, or may support the learning that you want to see in your classroom? So there's some real tactical kind of support that we've aimed to provide. But these big questions, like the ones Jonathan is raising, and Lance and Liza and Alegria, these questions, we don't want to leave them behind either. They're incredibly important to the educational institution as a part of society. Education plays a role, right? And we need to think about all of those interconnections. And so for us, the Digital Detox has been a place to ask those bigger questions about what are the trade-offs. And that's a really intentional framing that we've brought into this. What are the trade-offs? Recognizing that every choice we make, especially in a capitalist society, has trade-offs. Some we may not actually have much agency or control over, right? And we're just choosing between one bad option and a worse option. But I think pairing together the support and the preparation that faculty and students need to engage with this world, and also pairing that with difficult questions, messy, gnarly questions that don't have easy answers, that aren't a straightforward, like, press this button and do that. That to me is the sweet spot of the work that we're doing in faculty development right now. And it is super challenging as people working in faculty development to stay connected both to the support needs and to the broader impacts questions that are showing up. And that is, I think, both the sweet spot and the ultimate challenge right now in faculty development.
I mean, can I say, I think it's so cool that to hear several of you talking about, focusing on students. And I think that, there's a really interesting thing. I think this is putting pressure on us to examine some of our assumptions and to sort of do education better. And I think my personal preference is to do education better without this tool, but maybe this tool will have led us to think about what is good education. For a while, I was going to conferences, and every damn conference where people say, these are 8 wonderful things I can do with AI, I would sort of stop and think, every single one of the things, it took me a long time. I think it was around the time I talked to Alegria about what she's doing, and she was a counterexample. But every single thing I heard that was a good thing that came out of AI, if you just looked carefully at it, it was actually a dystopia, right? Faculty are overworked, so they don't want to have to write, the introduction to some bullshit, cover letter for their department self-analysis. Okay, the problem there is the bureaucracy of universities and having to write some bullshit introduction. Don't change the structure. Don't bring in something that burns megatons of carbon and harms workers and devalues the idea of human skill. Do that better. Someone said, well, class size is really important. So if we have individualized AI tutors, that's great. That'll be individualized attention. No, get a fucking human, pardon me if I curse, to actually talk to that person and fund this stuff with the money that otherwise would go into Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Sam Altman's pocket. And so I think, it's been interesting to me as a computer scientist. We've learned some of our previous assumptions were just wrong. We thought the Turing test was a reasonable test of artificial intelligence. It's just wrong. It's a done test because of sort of linguistic pareidolia. People find meaning in things that don't have meaning, right? And so so I think that's really great that people are focusing on the things you can do with it. I still don't think that I'm convinced about, like what Lance was saying about, and several people said, it's just capitalism, it's coming anyway, and we all burn carbon. We don't burn this much carbon. I was just in Ireland, and someone gave a talk and was saying that the hyperscale data centers in Ireland consume more power than all of the residential homes in Ireland. Right, that's a matter of scale there. These are big numbers. These people, the most valuable company in the history of capitalism was NVIDIA that makes graphics chips, right? That's a weird thing that happened to us because of this distortion of the market. So I think that slippery slope arguments are always hard. That's why we have judges and court systems and scholars and academics and intellectuals. But, there's a place between, burning down huge quantities and running these hyperscale systems, which require us to invade Greenland to get rare earth metals to build these chips or whatever the hell people say we have to do. And, whether I'm going to have 2 video conferences or 1 or no video conferences today. So I don't really see that as answering that concern of mine.
Hey, Jonathan, I have to bring up climate change. This is my students' #1 concern too. And I think I was one of the first people, not to brag or anything, but I wrote an essay about this in June of 2023 called Surviving the Textpocalypse, playing off of Matthew Kirshenbaum's Atlantic essay about how this would unleash the textpocalypse on us. I happen to have just finished Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future, which is a fantastic book. I recommend it to all my students. And I also had been working with a student on a project on NFTs. So as I began to create some training with Joel Glad about how LLMs worked, it was immediately obvious to me that these things were huge carbon suckers. Like, they were not good. But I asked AI about it. I just want to put all your fears to rest. I asked ChatGPT about it that summer, and it said, "Oh, don't worry, AI is going to solve the climate change problem." And however you feel about nuclear, I'm just going to throw this bomb in there. I love the German board game Power Grid. My strategy is always to build dirty coal as fast as I can to ramp up production and then go straight to nuclear. And I beat my kids almost every time. I'm like, y'all should know that this is my strategy, but they always just don't bid that power plant up like they should. Nuclear may not be the solution for a lot of people for a whole host of reasons, but it is forcing a shift to nuclear power, which is cleaner, as long as we don't have another 3 Mile Island or whatever. So, and also DeepSeek, I'm just going to throw it out there. Like there are other models. I think this is an issue right now, but I think because it's such an issue, this is something human ingenuity can work on. And the larger problem of climate change should consider to be top of mind for all of us. But I think AI might have been right. ChatGPT might have been right. It might help us to solve climate change. So I just had to throw that bomb back at you, Jonathan. You can disagree with me, but it's not my biggest concern right now. My biggest concern is something else that you mentioned. It's the existential threat to the university as we know it. And at least in the United States, we are experiencing an unprecedented moment where a lot of forces could come together. And this idea of personalized learning is crap, Jonathan. Why not both and? Why can't we have AI tutors and human tutors? That's how I'm teaching it in my writing classroom. And I don't know that it has to be an either or solution, but certainly anyone who thinks that US higher education is not under an existential threat right now is not paying attention.
Actually, on the ongoing, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Vid, and then I want to ask Tom to speak something, because Tom always, he hangs back and then he launches a nice, subtle, beautiful missile. No pressure, Tom. Vid, sorry.
Yeah, just there are some assumptions underlying the current conversation, and that's why in the study we started by asking every participant, what do they understand by AI in the first place, before we even talk about OpenAI. Assumptions like that AI uses a lot of power, that depends on what kind of AI. That mostly applies to large-scale models that have billions of parameters and are compute intensive to run. But there's also lots of other kinds of AI too. And quoting one of the interviews, one of the participants was saying, "We've made a lot of breakthroughs at the cost of unconditional resource investment up to now. And we've reached a point where we're very happy with what we've achieved there. But now we're trying to say, okay, now we have to stop throwing money and make it more efficient and make it more sustainable and make it more accessible. And there's going to be a lot of emphasis on trying to downsize in the next few years." So we're kind of at this peak of energy usage and still a lot of unsolved problems, but there might be ways around them. A couple of efforts that I'm aware of: at the University of Edinburgh, they have launched the Edinburgh Access to Language Models, ELM, we call it. And it's just an institutional subscription to OpenAI's APIs, where the subscription is paid by the university to ensure that all students get equal access to all models, even those that can't afford it. And they have a zero data retention contract, so that none of the data is used for training models. But I would say that that's not enough yet. It's one potential way to approach it, but I'm also trying to run a startup now where we would be providing schools with hardware to run AI models in-house so that data never even leaves the school in the first place. Making that sustainable is really difficult. We're trying to figure that out. But yeah, so there's assumptions about what AI we're talking about, and maybe some solutions might lie in, seeing if there's different kinds of AI.
And I think, not knowing if Alan's teeing me up with an actual question, right? Like,
No.
I would echo kind of some of Vid's comments there. Like, we're saying AI, and do we really mean LLM? And when we say LLM, do we really mean, one or two particular products? Like, that's a conversation, and I think has some specific things. If we're saying we're worried about the ecological impacts of things, when I tried to delve into it, because I feel a dearth of knowledge on my own part. Like, when they say it's escalating like this, it's an inflammatory headline. It is a lot relative to, say, data storage needs over time. When I look at the US energy consumption, it is still, I think, in the 7% range of the total energy usage. I don't know about Ireland, but they were saying maybe with AI by 2027 it would be at the 12% range of total energy in the United States for data centers. I could be remembering the fine details wrong. I see Jonathan shaking his head some degree, right? So without notes in front of me, but I tried to pursue this down and say all right, what kind of scale impact are we really looking at energy wise versus the entirety of it? Maybe that's a bad way to do it, but I just like to get the big picture before and try and settle it. And it led me down to figure out what are the most water intensive things we do in industry in the United States, and what happens to water in particular scenarios. Is it evaporating? Is it cycling continuously? Are we depleting aquifers? What do I need to know? I guess that's the bottom line. And what we try and do to some degree in the detox is give people the information they need to know to make those choices in an informed way, because it is so much, it is so diverse, it is so complex. There are so many different models. I think on Hugging Face right now, there's several million at this point, and they're different in lots of different ways that do a variety of different things and have different training data sets and are, giving people money or not giving people money. And that kind of complexity is really hard to talk about. And I feel to some degree bad about that, because I feel I'm going not all men, kind of deal, where you're, and that's where I struggle. Am I giving people the information they need to make decisions, or am I obscuring a conversation that needs to happen? And that's what I struggle with this.
I kind of wanted to bring it back. This is such a huge topic. We would need years to discuss it, right? We're talking really big picture, and I kind of wanted to bring this back to the classroom and to open education and to open educational resources. For example, it used to take me about a year to develop a good resource for a class. When I co-authored my last one with AI, it took me 3 months, which means I can now, and it also allowed me to create a differentiated content for students. This is a Spanish for health professions. For if you want to be a dentist, you're going to get different content. If you want to be a podiatrist, you'll get a different content. If you want to be a midwife, you can generate your own content. So these are things that we just cannot ignore. But I do want to address what Jonathan was saying, because when I prompted ChatGPT to tell me what were some of the dangers of AI for teaching, it said bad educational resources. And like everything else, anything can be used for bad and good. A class can be amazing in person or online, or terrible in person or online, depending on what you're doing. So I was at another presentation with the people who wrote this book. I don't know if you've seen it. Oh, and it's coming up backwards. But and so I asked him, because a lot of my writing faculty refused to use AI. And I asked him, how can I convince him? How can I convince him? And he said the best thing anybody could have said to me, which is, well, what are the learning objectives? because your learning objectives are going to make a really big difference. If your learning objective is that people create an argument from their brain, then they're not going to use AI, and you shouldn't make them do it. If your learning objective is that they learn how to leverage AI in their writing for feedback or for whatever, for grammar, for whatever it may be, then that's going to be a different learning objective. So that really put me at ease, because I've been sort of telling everybody, but you must use it in your writing classes. And then I realized, no, it really depends on learning objectives. So I would be curious to hear what everybody else is thinking about. What kind of applications can we have in the real class that can help us sleep at night after what Jonathan has already expressed to us? And then that is very true. And so, I really would love to hear that from others.
I'll jump in. Peter Shea talks a lot, in others as well, of like, this does allow for a lot more simulations. And, we can compare what this allows possible to what we know around like learning how to fly, and like simulations. The ability to create simulators was the thing that made commercial flying possible without like killing lots of people still trying to learn how to fly. And there is something here that, like, because of the cognitive energy it takes to create simulations and branching scenarios, like, we're never going to have enough people to do that in all the different disciplines and all the different ways. And so to me, there's really interesting opportunities. And this is where I'm seeing faculty lean into, is like creating simulations in different contexts, some in which it's like preparing for real human simulations. So I've seen in nursing, nursing bots that help prepare, or in other contexts where it's like, there's still like a need to practice with humans, but even before you get that, to really start to like build out the, like, how do you apply this? And I think that to me is some of its most interesting. So it's like that piece that I think is really interesting. And then the other avenue I keep seeing and doing is the, like, AI, using AI as a reflection tool. And I think using a script, using generative AI, using a script to have it interview or help you with the reflection process. We know reflection is so powerful for learning, but right now, the way it often happens is the student writes something and then they submit it, and then the instructor looks at it. And it's only at that point, which could be 48 hours later, could be 3 days later, could be a month later. And, it's only at that point that, there's a recognition of like, oh, at this point, I would have loved to ask that follow-up question, right? The student says, I didn't like it. Well, like, and then goes on, but doesn't ever really explain why they didn't like it. Well, reflection is a practice, and it's a muscle. And some people have been doing it, but a lot of our early in their reflecting practice need those interventions. And so there's a really interesting way for me, I see AI as that possibility to make it dialogue, even though it's largely just internal dialogue that's like drawing out what's already been said, to help them get there, to help lots of people get there. Because again, like, I love reflection. I do plenty of it. And also, like, it's hard to get there if you don't have models, or if you're in that time lapse of like, you're doing it and you're not really getting feedback till 2 weeks later, where there could be really good interventions.
But can we do the my game of the great thing you just said is actually dystopian, or maybe a nicer way of saying that would be, suppose you gave me 1/1,000,000th of the money that's been invested in OpenAI and Gemini and all these tools to find another solution. So, simulations, you were describing simulations are hard to make. Okay, so someone needs to write some good tools that make it easy to create simulations. That would be a well-defined task, and people could try to do it. Someone, the reflection thing, I could imagine some reflection tools that, some tools based on software that don't involve scraping the entire internet of all of humans' creativity and then spitting out and pretending that you're creating something new. I don't think we have to go down this route of giving all of this money and power and right, to burn carbon to people for this generalized tool for solve those specific problems. And one other point quickly, people talk about, you know, like Alegria was talking about examples she's been in, also examples of like making tools that generate things. You mentioned, Lance, as well, giving quick feedback to students, right? You know, I'm worried about the human in the loop. Was it you, Liza, who mentioned the human in the loop, right? I mean, we know these things produce garbage because they have no mind there. They're just statistical correlations of tokens, right? So like everyone where I live is really excited because Google gave advice to mix Elmer's glue when you're making pizza, because otherwise the cheese slides off the slice of pizza when you pick it up to eat it. And, you know, because it doesn't understand anything, it's just correlating words like don't make it slip with glue. And so it seems that I've talked to a lot of people in the AI space. Well, clearly AI should only be used by people who have expertise and spend the time to think through the things that are generated before they are put in the faces of the eyeballs of the students, right? So, you know, I'm asking you, Alegria, when you offer these things to your students about the specialized these customized versions, do you read every single? Are you sure that there isn't someone basically doing the equivalent of advising people to mix glue in their pizza recipe in some specialized corner of the thing? If you don't read it all ahead of time, and if you did read it all ahead of time, is it really saving you that much time?
Hey, I have to say, I make my students evaluate the AI using a verification checklist. Is that what you do, Alegria, too? It's way fun to have them verify the information themselves with credible sources.
Indeed. I think this is probably the best opportunity to have them be critical thinkers about what AI produces. And my students get to rate the answers and reflect on what they said and how it's useful. Now, I have a pretty easy out that most of you would not have, and is that I'm using this with a language acquisition purpose. So if my students are creating a prompt of give me 10 words about the human body for a podiatrist, then they're going to get those words, and then they'll get to manipulate those words and do whatever exercise comes after that, right? So I always tell them, remember, this may not be accurate, but this is what you're learning in your nursing class or your podiatrist class or whatever, you know, so the content does not have to be fully accurate. Now, they do get a disclaimer and they do get to think about it critically. But of course, I think this is something that we need to be doing. I have them do an exercise where I write, we all prompt for images, cute baby. And you know what you get when you get cute baby. It's a blonde, blue-eyed baby girl, right? But this is the conversation that you have. And then my students come up to me and say, Professora, I was trying to write this book. I was trying to make an image about this little Mexican kid who goes to class the first day. But when I said Mexican kid, it puts a sombrero on it. And I said, okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about what is happening here, right? So I think it provides us great opportunities to be critical thinkers about what this is producing. And it makes for, I think it gives them the tools going forward to be able to critique these things, or when they're using the chatbots to practice their conversations with patients, and then the chatbot goes nutty and starts talking stupid, then I tell them, you have to tame your chatbot, and this is what you tell them, and redirect them. So then all of a sudden they're empowered to go like, oh, okay, I can tell it to shut up and tell me again or redirect. They need to stand up to these things, and hopefully this way they will realize that AI is not all knowing. It has lots of issues. And then they can move forward with that type of critical thinking.
I'd also love to speak. That was so great, Alegria. Yes. I'd also like to speak to your comment about it being most useful for experts, though, Jonathan. I do think that's true. I also put in the chat, these tools are getting better so quickly and so fast, but because, as you mentioned, of the nature of the tool, the LLM, it's always going to have a risk of hallucination, right? Like it's just statistically what's going to happen. But I would suggest for anyone who is not an expert that you maybe consider trying out these tools on something you're not an expert with. And I have my students try it with something they are expert in. Like I might have a chat with it about your favorite anime or your favorite video game so they can see where it gets things wrong. But I took what was a huge leap for me. I'm an English professor, and I decided, okay, I have ChatGPT now. I'm going to take a Python class. I'm going to take Intro to Python. Never done computer programming. The reason I got interested is because I was having Claude write some programs for me. And I could, open up a compiler and see that they were working, but I didn't know why. And I didn't know if they could work better. So I was curious. Took Introduction to Python. It was not bad. What I loved most about it was I had ChatGPT over on the side, and I teach my students to use it the same way. Not to give me the answers when I was wrong, but to show me where I was wrong, walk me through the steps so that I wouldn't make that error again, and then give me 5 more practice examples so that I could practice. And I never would have had the confidence to do that if I hadn't had that assistant right on the side. And again, like, could a human do that for me? Absolutely. But could a human do that for me at 11:30 at night? Probably not. And that's the reality of where my students are, that having that personalized writing tutor that I've built for them is really helpful to them because it meets them right where they are. It doesn't mean they don't still go to the writing center, but it means that they have that access to that tool right when they need it. But one other thing I want to say about the expertise, one of my biggest concerns is no longer climate change. It's the dearth of potential expertise a few years down the road. And what I mean by that is that who is going to train the experts? It's great that these tools are useful for experts, but how will people become expert? And I am a bad example of this. Alegria, you mentioned how it saved you time, right? And I could not have written a critical theory textbook in 4 months without AI. No way that could happen. But it does not save me time. And I want to make that really clear. This could just be a me problem, but AI does not save me time at all. Instead, I'm doing the work probably of roughly 5 people. And that's a bad thing. I mean, it's the reality, but I have poor boundaries around my work and personal life anyway. And AI has absolutely enabled that. I can now be so productive in whatever amount of time I want to work at any time of day. And I think we need to be watching that as well as we look at burnout, the real concern for burnout with faculty.
I want to pick up on something that Liza was just talking about the ways in which these tools can play a role in supporting learners. And I'll say at Middlebury, we've had quite a few faculty and more staff, I would say, from the learning support side of things, interested in having conversations about how these tools might fit into the ways in which they support students. I'm actually going to throw this over to Tom because there were some interesting recent cases where I think we have seen at Middlebury an increase in learning support needs from students around things like reading comprehension, computational thinking, some critical thinking, right? And so some of those needs have increased, and I think the learning support staff that we've been talking to recently have expressed um, a potential way forward that includes leveraging some of these tools, particularly I think Notebook LM has really kind of gained some attention among our learning support folks in supporting students who need additional help with learning. So Tom, I don't know if you want to add to that, but I think that's been for us a really interesting development.
Well, it's hard not, in perfect world, we would have one-on-one tutors for the people, to Jonathan's kind of dystopia, utopia kind of parallel. The thing I struggle with is like the amount of funding there compared to the amount of funding to do this is substantially different. So it's not like an exchange pattern, at least at the micro level. Maybe at macro levels that things end up being different. I think the thing here too is it is a human. So say the tutor is with the student who is looking to build scaffolding, and they're using the tool together first to like model the scaffolding behavior. And then in kind of a progressive release model, they no longer need that person as much. And so that kind of pattern where they're empowering them to have tools to do particular types of analysis and to build their own internal capacity towards eventually maybe not needing the tools at all, or being able to choose them with regard to speed, or I dislike this more, so I would rather be, and some of the tension there. Do you do hard things because they are hard, or do you, I think those things are all become part of kind of a metacognitive lens of both tools, self, and my relationship to other people. So it's a tricky, nuanced, and ongoing thing. But in some of these scenarios, we've seen it be really nice and powerful for individuals.
That's really interesting. I think what Amy and Tom talk about, like supporting students with these tools, is another kind of really interesting thing. I always wonder if we stopped calling it AI, which has become sort of a culturally laden term. If you said instead statistical model, I'm going to go, the student's going to walk in and is going to use a statistical model to get advice about what courses to take. I could see that would make sense in some circumstances, right? A student who has taken, 6 courses is most of their way to some degree, but I don't know, needs to get this other course. But my wife was the major student advisor in her department for many years, and she dealt with students' emotional issues. She was the pedagogy of care kind of thing. And we wouldn't say, this is a great statistical model because it offers great pedagogy of care, right? So I don't think it's silly to look for, if we could call it an artificial intelligence, for a pedagogy of care coming from artificial intelligence. I see from people, Amy's nodding, so I think you guys have thought about this in your context as well, obviously. Can I just say one last thing? We're rolling toward the end. There's a thing we haven't talked about, which I think I find as another, I'm sort of astonished. I had a really great email exchange with Mahabeli about this, it just seems to me in the context of the academy, I don't understand why we as a culture have given up on, sourcing our materials. Liza, you gave some examples of, it wrote some good little code snippets for you, and they were great. Or, you didn't understand something, so it gave you several examples. It gave you some other things to work on. Do you think the statistical model did that? I mean, the statistical model trained on hundreds of thousands, petabytes of human creativity, which was scraped and assembled in a very clever way, was well harvested and organized to help you in your learning. But that's the human creation that was harvested to help you. And I'm glad it helped you, but I'm concerned as an academic. We used to think that the primary academic sin was using someone else's ideas without credit. And I realize this is happening at scale. It's happening to petabytes of human creativity, and so it's not practical to give people credit. There's somewhere at some community college in West Virginia, someone wrote a cute little handout that they put in a Google Doc, which that thing, scraped and was used to make those exercises that you found so helpful, Liza. I don't see how we as a community have just because they're going to scale and it's not practical to give people credit. This great content is coming from humans. And how have we given up on the primary value of academia, of giving people credit for the work they do and respecting human creativity?
I put in the chat, I just don't care. I'm post-plagiarist along with Sarah Elaine Eaton. I really don't care. And I that was put to the test. I found out that my book that I published with Penguin several years ago was scraped as part of the book's 3 data set. And I had one moment of, oh, this is very jarring. And then I thought, do I really care? And I thought, no, I don't really care. So I think knowledge belongs to humans, but I realize other people feel differently. So I absolutely respect people who are upset about that exact problem. It's just not you asked me, it's not a problem for me. So
I'll jump in as somebody who's just finished his dissertation on academic piracy. That again, for me, it's the bigger picture of, my dissertation was interviewing people who, a good deal of them who said in order to be scholars, they had to rely on academic pirate net platforms like Sci-Hub and LibGen. And I think there's disconnecting attribution and copyright. And I think the academy hasn't done well with that, which means part of the goal of citing is the whole scholarly endeavor is so that you can follow those footsteps back and look at that research. But so much of it is locked behind paywalls that unless you are connected to institutions, you can't do that. And so again, I'm gonna go at the system level and be like, hey, if we want to talk about blowing up copyright and that as in many ways in this context as a harmful practice for the way scholarship exists or the way writing and creation exists within the academy, I'm here for that. I'm on that end of it of let's completely recreate it, because there's so much that the way that academic publishing works that robs people of ownership of their material. Like I had people who were like, I have to actually go to Sci-Hub to access my work. So I'll just say, like, yeah, I think there's a rich discussion to have there, but it isn't just AI, it's the entire infrastructure of publishing.
So Alan had to leave a couple minutes early. I think we should respect people. We've done an hour of this. We could do. I would love to talk to this group of people for many more hours. But I think what we should do, just to kind of wrap things up. I personally have no closing remarks. I think but if anyone has a closing remark, like Vid was talking about a study he's done. If anyone has a link or a thing they want to quickly say before we turn this off, I think we could take a few seconds per person to do that. I don't have maybe. I think we already posted the digital detox that you guys are doing, Amy and Tom. I think there was already a link posted to that. And if anyone wants to post anything else, thank you, Vid. Is that can we get that out on the? I don't have get that out on the also on the YouTube chat as well. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, my link's not posting for some reason, Jonathan, but I would love to plug a completely open CC BY class that I'm teaching right now. I always build the airplane while I'm flying. It's on writing with generative AI, and it has been an absolutely delightful class. That my class is working very hard, but they're doing very hard things with AI. And I have a wide mix from adopters to resistors in the class. So I think it's the type of at least exercises that might be interesting wherever you stand on the AI spectrum, just to look at the types of things that are possible with human and AI collaboration. So, but I can't get the link in there for some reason. So yeah, anyway.
Okay, well, I'm sure people can just search with their favorite search engine for your. Do you have a title that people a keyword? Tom got Vid's link in. Tom, can you get?
If you click over to the comments, there's private chat, and then there's comments as a second tab. If you click over there, you can.
Maybe Alegria, do you want to put a URL of some of the resources you've built that are openly licensed in the comments as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. But as a closing remark, I did want to circle back to something Jonathan said about your wife and the work that she did. And that is, AI kind of saves us time. If you're a lazy AI user, it saves you a lot of time. If you're a conscientious AI user, it might not as much. But it may open little pockets where you can actually use this time to do the things that only humans can do. And I advise my students, and AI can't hug them. AI can't tell them that she's going to be okay after her mother was deported. AI cannot do these things. We can do it. And so we cannot forget our human side ever in education. So that's my closing remark.
Great. Thank you so much. Amy and Tom, do you have anything you want to post quickly? No. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. This was so much fun. What a great group of people to talk to. Take care, everybody.